Welcome to Women's Excellent Podcast. I'm here with Mary Reilly Nichols, founder and CEO of Blue Swan Yoga. My name is Sarita Tabares, and Mary and I will be having a conversation about her journey. So tell me a little bit about your background and what motivated you to start your own company.
Well, it all started quite a long time ago, really, in the 1970s when I was in college, and I studied anthropology, and I was very interested in religion, and especially in ecstatic uh, religious behaviors and practices. I was interested in that and an anthropological point of view. And in my studies, I started to actually get very, very involved in uh, the practices of ecstatic experience. And I eventually met a great master. And right after college, I lived in the ashram of this master in India. And after 5 years of living in an ashram, I became a person in the world. And what could I do? So upon leaving the ashram life, I started using breath technique as a therapist in the treatment of stuttering. And for 10 years, I did that. And I really got a very practical experience for the power of the breath to basically to calm you down and to take you out of fight or flight behaviors, the part of the nervous system which we know as the fight or flight, and to trigger the opposite type of nervous system experience, which is calm, digest, rest, they call it. And so I learned very quickly, and actually over a long period of time, how powerful the breath is to help us negotiate the world. And from there also, I started doing this was back in the 80s. So hatha yoga wasn't such a huge thing, but some dance studio people asked me if I would help them develop a hatha yoga program. So I started teaching hatha yoga, which is the yoga of posture. And through that, and through the many years of doing it, I understood that hatha yoga is really assuming a series of body language statements that empower us, really. And that also in a hatha yoga practice, you are getting in touch with your evolutionary history. That's how I experienced it. Because, we do a lot of animal poses. We bring ourselves into a child's pose. So we connect with our own root, really the root of evolution in every cell of the body. And that also is empowering and again strengthening for people. So I became very passionate about hatha yoga, breath technique, and of course, all along I've also been teaching meditation. One last thing is that I also then had opportunities to work in psychiatric settings with people who have real stress disorders. So teaching breath. So there's a few things that are tools that we use. We use posture, we use breath, we use thought or ways of thinking or positive affirmations. All those are different words for mantra, the power of word. And the power of word also relates to body language, because the power of word is not just what we say, it's our tone, it's our facial expression and our posture, our body language. So all of that. And then I've been, one last thing, teaching. So from the physical benefits of all this, you can actually move into the mystical benefit, if you will, the ability to transcend our normal worldly perceptions and to experience our connectivity with universal consciousness. And that's also very possible with all the tools that we have in yoga.
Understood. You used a couple of terms. Static was one of them. I didn't understand what that meant. Can you elaborate and
Yes.
define that?
You know I can. So, and it's not a word I would, bandy about too much because it does, I think it brings some misunderstanding or it stops the flow a little bit because what does it mean? But ecstasy is out of oneself. That's what the word kind of breaks down to in etymology. And what are you going out of is our egoic identification with the small self, and we're moving into our identification with the universe. Now, of course, we're part of the universe, right? Of course, we're constructed of the universe.
Mhm.
And normally, though, we really start to develop a very strong sense of ourselves connected to the body and to the story that goes along with the body. And
Mhm.
this becomes very stressful. It is stressful to feel I am this body, because the body, you may notice, it's temporary. That's very
Mhm.
frightening, and it gets pain. And within our relationships, there's a lot of drama. So a human being needs to disabuse themselves of the stressful identification with the ego, we call it, or the body. Every once in
Mhm.
a while, it's a requirement of the nervous system to release and disinhibit the energy to become one with. And people use drugs and alcohol, but that really starts to fail very quickly as
Mhm.
a method. So this is what spirituality is, but it's ancient. There, all throughout time, human beings have been singing, dancing, uh, fasting, doing special ways of eating, in order to release themselves into the connectivity with the infinite. And
Mhm.
that is the only thing that really, really soothes the nervous system. And as I say, unfortunately, in a way, the use of drugs, it seems like a shortcut, but it starts to fail you really quickly and gets us, in the wrong direction. So we have to use some other methods. But I believe that ecstasy is a human need.
Understood. I love that term that you used, infinite, this connection. I like it to understand how we can evolve. There's the physical world, the three-dimensional world, and then there's the spiritual world. And to know that, I mean, our spirit, our soul continues, it's infinite, right?
Yeah.
And how do you live with yourself in this three-dimensional world, right? How do you survive this? There's the physicality part that basically decays and in real time,
Mhm.
and it goes by so fast, you don't realize it until, you're well into your middle age or thereafter, and you go, "Oh, wow, I'm getting closer to the end," you
I
know?
know, yeah.
And it's, so tell me more about your experience because you have this technical education, studying anthropology, right? Is that what it
That's
was?
right.
And then you have, you go to an ashram, and here is the spiritual aspect, I believe. And so what were the key factors there? Like why did you go to an ashram? Like how did you even think about that? It's
So
Where's
I'm
the
going to be
connection?
totally honest, but and again, this is not something I would normally discuss like in a job interview, but um, so my nature is that I have a lot of you might call non-ordinary experience, and you may have heard of out of body experiences.
Mhm,
And so these things, they really happened to me, and they started happening in college. And I didn't understand this at all, so I thought I had real problem. I went to the health services a few times, and I got checked for with EEGs and stuff, something wrong here. But when I uh, got introduced to the energetic aspect of yoga, and I'm going to
mhm,
use that word Kundalini. which you probably
Yes.
heard.
Love. Yes.
Kundalini is what is known, it's also known throughout the world in different ways. We can see the motifs, the symbolic motifs that express the map of the Kundalini or the subtle energy body in Egypt and in Mayan culture. And so it's that double helix with the central channel or the central axis, which, the health symbol of the caduceus, which has two, it looks like a DNA, the double helix, and then it's usually where there's a hospital
I've
that'll
seen it.
symbol, right? So that's
Mhm.
a very universal map of the subtle energy channels. The subtle energy is also cultivated and amplified in practices like Qigong, which is a wonderful method and very, very, deep. And the Chinese medicine development of the knowledge of subtle energies is vast and ancient. But anyway, in yoga, this is called Kundalini. So
Mhm.
I had that awakening. And when I met my teacher, who was Swami Muktananda, he was adept at awakening that energy and also to do the practices which enable you to channel and develop it. So when this is happening, I really almost felt like I had nowhere else to go but to live in the ashram, which was a very disciplined place, which I loved a lot, because there was, in the normal world, people thought I was either crazy or lying when I would talk about my
Well,
experiences.
it's Western civilization, right? We're
Yeah,
just not connected. We don't yeah, spirituality is just not in our vocabulary, right? It's
right.
it's it's like it's innate in so many cultures and so
Yeah.
many communities, but here
Mhm.
there's just we're so disconnected.
True.
So
We've gotten so materialistic and so technological, but it's true
mhm,
that, like, the Shakers and the Quakers, the
mhm,
Holy Rollers, those are all systems that definitely we're connecting with the subtle energy because it does make your body move sometimes. So,
mhm,
and you see, even now there are strong spiritual practices going on in churches where people sing,
mhm,
and that singing has a neurobiological reason, because those long exhales, which you do when you're singing, um,
mhm.
what they do is they produce a nervous system state. So sometimes without singing, I have our people, doing long exhalations. I can do that with you if you wanted to try it in a moment to see how it
Yeah.
changes your mind state.
Yeah, no, as a former dancer, that was like my release, my spirituality. It released like the tension in my body, it was like the expressions and it just it made me it what I call like it raised my vibration, right? It was just like I was more powerful, more divine, more in tuned. My body, my mind, my soul, everything was just like working so well,
Oh,
all
beautiful.
connected. I'm really curious about, stuttering. Because how do you rectify that? How do you heal? Like, I mean, we've heard a lot about studying more so now with President Biden
Correct.
and, the contrast, to his opponent, which I won't name, but, how I just won't give that energy out there,
Yeah.
but no, but, you have somebody that makes fun and disparages individuals, that, what do I call it? Anyway, versus somebody that, encourages and is an inspiration to others.
Mhm.
So, and I have my nephew actually studied for a long time, and where do you think that like stuttering comes from? Like, what is that energy? Why and how do you heal it? How do
Mhm.
you rectify
Well,
it?
So I worked for the National Center for Stuttering, which was instituted by my boss, who was Dr. Martin Schwartz. And
Mhm.
he had, because of the ability to do MRI and being able to see within the body, which was sort of an early thing in the 80s,
Right.
and he was a speech physiologist. He saw that there was I don't want to call it a malfunction, but a spasm in the vocal folds, which we call vocal cords, when a person was in this situation of stuttering, and that what we see as stuttering is a struggle to reestablish the flow and the normal vibration between
Mhm.
the two folds, which are called, we call them vocal cords. So what he did, he developed a thing called the airflow technique, and it required that the person let out a little bit of air prior to speaking and to address the first syllable slowly. All right.
Mhm.
Now, later on to learn that when we inhale, our heart rate rises slightly. When we exhale, the heart rate lowers. That's why we feel waiting to exhale, that the exhale is associated with letting go of stress and tension, of releasing and all those feelings. So but we weren't really talking about that. All Dr. Schwartz knew was that this little bit of an air flow, followed by the slow uptake of the first syllable. And so what we would have people do is practice. People who stutter usually have feared situations and feared words. Okay, and this is anticipatory stress. I know that I'm having an interview and I'm going to have to say my name. This is the kind of thinking. Now, many people who stutter, and I believe probably, I've suspected President Biden does this, they word substitute. They look for another word to put in place of the word that they sense they're going to stutter on. But you
Mhm.
can't substitute your name, which then makes it a very feared thing. So there's certain things that if you're dependent on word substitution, you became very worried when you have to say something that you can't substitute, like your address, so on. So, but what's interesting, it tells us a lot about fear and
Mhm.
about how we create the situation we fear by anticipating trouble.
Mhm.
And you might think of it, let's say,
It's anxiety. It's a vibration, right? Yeah, I can understand that. You're
that's right.
anticipating that you're
And you're
going to
picturing,
fail or that, you're
yeah.
not gonna get the word out, and so it's
Oh,
like
it's so scary. And,
stress.
for people who stutter, as children, they had, catastrophically humiliating experiences in the classroom that just like destroyed them. And
Mm,
so this becomes like it's a social death. It
yeah.
can be really
Plus,
so
other people are not as patient. They're not as empathetic, especially as you're growing up, you're young, you know, it's just other children and your peers, they just don't have the patience. They're not empathetic.
no.
Yeah.
So what's neat too, Sarita, is that so then we would give people like systematic practices to do, and I would listen to their practice via tapes. And it's called systematic desensitization. So if you fear ordering in a restaurant, then you would practice at home with menus. Okay, then you'd practice at home with menus and another person role playing as the wait staff, and then you'd go to the restaurant and you'd practice with another person talking to them, and the rest. You could systematize the desensitization to the feared situation. So I learned a lot about fear and about how to um, quell our anxiety gradually, and using breath and staying calm, and all of this stuff. So that's what the journey
Well,
was about.
when I was reading a little bit about you and your background, it said that you've helped CEOs, like high stress level individuals like myself,
Yeah,
and, I've just started doing more breath work because I feel that it gives me like a restart, you
yeah,
know. I have to, okay, let me just start this over. It changes my vibration. It's like, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. I'm trying to catch myself, when I'm in a high stress situation and going, okay, I just need to
Yeah.
take a moment here to
Mhm.
hit the restart button and just think of it, change my perspective, right?
Correct.
So, but it is very difficult. I was with a person that was teaching me how to do breath work, and I was so impatient during the session. I just thought to myself, when is this going to be over? I don't have time. I have to get back to literally this happened last week on Thursday. One of my colleagues set up this appointment, and I thought, are you out of your mind to take me out of work for 2 or 3 hours? Have you lost your mind? I've got to get back there and I've got work to do. And I was really resentful.
Mhm.
And while I was, she put all of these wires or whatever on me, and there was this graph, and it was telling me how I was breathing, and it was, and I was just like, I want to get out of this chair. So how do you take these individuals? I mean, here it is, a CEO, prominent thought leaders, law enforcement, high stress jobs, homemakers. I mean, raising children,
Totally.
and having to multitask
Yeah.
and having careers, women especially, we lose our cool fairly easily a couple of times a day. So how do you like take high stress, in these like dire situations,
Yeah.
and how do you manage, how can you teach someone like me?
That it's a funny question. Well, sometimes the people that we're talking about have been prescribed in the psychiatric practice to sit down and try these methods. So sometimes they're kind of, it's not, I won't say forced, but but it's they've been given this as a prescription, and but for now, sometimes for the CEO types, it's really a matter of having an advantage, really, because it's a competitive world. And it's funny because there's the sayings of the Buddha were written down by his disciples, and sometimes they're called sutras. And there's one called the Anapanasati Sutra, which is all about breath awareness. And in that statement, the Buddha himself said, breath awareness will bring you many advantages. So in a way, we're looking for an edge. We're looking for an ability to be successful in the battlefield, as you have described it. That the situation that we're thrown into life. We're not sitting alone in a mountaintop. That's what was great about ashram life. You get your 3 square meals a day, and you might be cooking them, but you're doing a lot of service. But everything's taken care of, and all you do is practice. But most of the time in the world, we're thrown into it. We've got the kids, we've got, if you do, and you've got the managing a home if you're lucky enough to be a homemaker. So the thing is that, and the Bhagavad Gita, which is another very famous spiritual text, is all about the hero learning yoga literally on the battlefield in the middle of a war. So you're going to fall off the horse. You're going to have times when you react in ways that are disadvantageous, if not embarrassing. And when you talked about the impatience, I'm wearing a little turtle right here in order to remind myself to be patient. So
Wow.
I got you. And sometimes it works. If I look in the mirror, oh yeah, the turtle. But
Slow down.
what you were talking about, that the rapid, we call that fight or flight. Okay,
Mhm.
so that's when you're in the nervous system state of fight or flight, and it is reactive, and it can be exciting, and a lot of making a decision, but the can also be that you're resistant to the situation and fight, or
Mhm.
fleeing doesn't always mean you get up and run out of the room. Sometimes it means we flee mentally. We're not really going to be present. So
Mm.
the fight or flight state, which probably has served in many situations, is not the only tool or state of mind that is effective in situations. Now we want the other part of the nervous system. So it's very interesting that the nervous system is bilateral, just like the brain, just like the body. uh,
Mhm.
that there's the fight or flight, and then there's what is known as rest and digest. That's your parasympathetic. Fight or flight's called sympathetic. So parasympathetic is what we're interested in cultivating.
Mhm.
So when the ideal state is when they're balanced, when you're excited. And I make an example, even though I'm not a skier, but my cousin skis, and he's got to be very alert. It's high, slopes. It's kind of dangerous. So there's a bit of fight or flight there. But he learns to relax, learns to breathe. And when you're both relaxed and alert, then you are in the flow. So, what we want to do, what you're talking about, is learn how to turn on that calming. So, that
Mhm.
part of the calming nervous system that this we call parasympathetic, it's mindful. It's like, shall I say this or shall I say that? It's in fight or flight, you say it, and then, oh, what did I just
Yeah.
do? So, I don't know if that ever happens, but
No, 100%. You're on a rampage. You're right. It's fight or flight. You're just like
oh,
getting it done and,
yeah,
you don't have time to self-reflect. You're
yeah,
just spewing it out, right?
gosh,
And that's why I that one session was teaching me about I've always been a breather, but it was really telling me like, it actually showed me a very valuable lesson.
very
Something
nice.
that I said I was going to do this year, one of my New Year's resolutions. You know how you do those and, like, you forget about them a
Yeah.
week later, but one of them was, "Sarita, you gotta put yourself first.
Mm,
You gotta take care of yourself. You gotta take care of your health. You've gotta make time for you," which
yes.
is, when I look at these, high stress individuals that you're working with,
Mhm.
um, you know, I was having a really hard time taking care of myself last
Yeah.
week when I went into this breathing session.
Yes.
And, but you're reminding me that, in order to be a better leader
Yeah.
and more effective, you got to take care of yourself. And, these exercises will enable you to be a, a better, a, a better human, a better leader.
Yeah.
It's,
Wonderful. That's
more,
really
more divine,
yes.
more,
It's very
more
true.
kind to yourself and others, right? It's just like,
I love what you're saying, and I'm thinking of one CEO in particular, and it doesn't mean you're gonna be a pushover at all. Um,
right.
it simply means that you're more conscious and you're also a better listener,
Mhm.
um, and less reactive and more mindful. So I think it does. It's as you say, better leader means it gives what the Buddha said. You're going to have many advantages,
Yeah.
and it's good for
And
relationships too. I mean, your
yeah.
personal relationships. I'm married like almost 40 years, and I tell people, you don't think I've been breathing and making myself calm for 40 years? you know?
Oh, goodness. No, it's, you feel better about yourself when
Yes.
you're, when you can behave that way, when you can control and breathe
Yeah.
through it. And hence, people feel better about being around you. So this was such an interesting conversation. I could have been here for hours, honestly, because I'm so interested. I think that we have so many things in common. We've crossed journeys. I would love to continue this conversation, and we're going to talk to Matthew about this because I had so many other questions for you.
What?
We have to end, but this is honestly part one of many conversations with Mary Reilly Nichols because there's just so much more to cover, and I'm
Fantastic.
so curious, and I want you to share your learnings with us. It's, we need more of you. Um, seriously, we need. I mean, you've definitely crossed over, right? Um, and I can feel it. So, and we're gonna talk about your crossover on our next call for sure because, I think I'm really interested in understanding more about the spirituality and your journey, and how you've evolved, into this incredible human. I can't thank you enough for your time, and I'm so
Thank
sorry
you,
that we
Sarita.
have to cut off, but
It's amazing to meet you. You have a wonderful light coming out of you.
oh,
You
Thank you.
do.
I
You really
appreciate
do.
that. I see your light too. Thank you. Alrighty. Thank you so much for your time
Thank
once again.
you.
Alrighty. We'll see each other soon.
Me
Until
too.
next time.